Promotional consideration paid for by the following. Yo Joe Outlet, your only source for G.I. Joe weapons and vehicle accessories. Don't have that incomplete Joe any longer. Connect with Yo Joe Outlet Center and complete that figure for an awesome price. Go check them out on eBay at Yo Joe Outlet Center and Facebook Yo Joe Outlet. Guys, you know I love a good horror movie. And what is the point of a horror movie? It's to scare you. The Fear Footage Part 1 and Part 2 accomplished that exactly. It scared me. It made me jump. And I'm not embarrassed to say, it made me shriek a few times, just like a little child. Guys, go check out thefearfootage.com. If you like found footage movies, forget that. If you like horror movies in general, if you like to be scared, if you like to pull the blanket up over your eyes, go check out The Fear Footage 1 and 2. Order it directly from thefearfootage.com. Blu-rays on sale, or go check them out on Amazon, The Fear Footage. Hey guys, New 80s Revolution down here in the cave. Ready to talk about the end. The end of the greatest toy line to ever grace a childhood. The greatest 8-inch giant rubber action figures to ever sit proudly on a shelf, on a peg, in a child's heart. We're here to talk about the end of the LJN WWF Wrestling Superstars line. And with that, the end of a beautiful era, the end of a beautiful portion of childhood. But not really for me, because, you know, I have proudly admitted playing with these figures well into my teens. Probably when I should have been dating or socializing with humans. I was locked away in my room creating storylines and title changes and heel turns. But 1989 saw the very sad end of the line. And we could go watch The Toys That Made Us, which I don't watch because I should have made that show myself or been on it. We could go watch and find out what happened with LJN and why they went under, or why they switched to video games and teamed up with Acclaim. And, they had a few lawsuits going on and a few hits to the company. And, a couple of the members branched off and did their own thing. And I don't know. Whatever the reason that a toy company goes under. And it's kind of hard to, it's hard to imagine. And, these are one of the most successful toy lines. And in 89, wrestling is really, peaking. But I can understand why, as we switch from the 80s to the 90s, the big clunky rubber toy just, isn't cutting it anymore. All of the other action figures of the time are smaller and articulated, and, maybe there was just a lack of interest in this style of toy. And we see that. We see that happen when Hasbro takes over the line just 1 year later and puts out figures that are plastic, articulated, and half the size of the LJNs. So that has to say something, right? That has to mean something, and why the LJN style is over, faded. it certainly wouldn't do anything for kids today. I don't think kids today would want these style of figures. Kids today need, moving wrist joints and finger joints that go like that. I mean, we've already gone off on that rant. But so 89 for the figures. These I never, and there's various varying reports on the channel about who saw what in stores. Some people saw the black cards in stores. I never did. I never, ever, ever saw a black carded figure anywhere in the wild. Anywhere. The 1989, the 1988 Pro Wrestling Illustrated Year in Review magazine was the first time I saw an ad for the 1989 figures. And that ad has been circulating all around, and we've all seen it. And I'll see if I can find it and insert it here. But that is, so I was sitting in a grocery store reading a wrestling magazine, as I always did. And it was specifically the 1988 PWI, Pro Wrestling Illustrated Year in Review. And if you remember, that was like the best magazine of the year because, and nobody did it better than Pro Wrestling Illustrated, but they reviewed the entire year and tons of color and tons of stories from different federations. And usually there'd be something special in the magazine. And in this case, the insert, the flyer, the advertisement, if you will, for the 1989 LJN figures was there. And in very, very, very early issues of this Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine, they did have, so basically it was, and I think I showed you, and I probably got the photo up, but it was a full page ad that had cartoon drawings of the figures, some not even what the figure ended up looking like Andre the Giant. And underneath it, it's coming soon and wrestling superstars, and it had 4 figures, and then underneath it had writing of what the figures were, had the names listed. And in very early copies of that ad, the Barbarian, Smash, and Bad News Brown were listed. And then in going forward, they were blacked out, literally blacked out. And then in the next installment of the ad, they were removed completely, but you could see the gap where the name was. And I always thought that was so cool, that they had them there initially for a very brief run, and then they blacked them out, and then they edited them out completely. So we know that Bad News Brown and the Bushwhackers and Brother Love were all rumored to be part of the next series. But in '89. Smash, Barbarian, Bad News Brown were going to be included in this batch. So that's how I first knew that they existed, and they were $16.99, which is extremely high priced for the time. $16.99 for the final 89 series of figures. And I could pick 2 for some reason. I remember I was allowed to pick 2. And I got the Big Boss Man, and I got Haku. In my mind, I didn't need another Andre the Giant. Rick Rude had a horrible pose, so I bypassed him. And the Warlord was awesome, but for some reason I went with Haku over the Warlord because in the ad he had a crown. And then when he came in real life, he didn't have a crown. So I think I got the Haku just because of the crown. The Warlord is one of the best figures LJN ever made. So there was nothing wrong with him. I just went with Haku because of the crown. And I didn't pick the Ultimate Warrior because I turned my Paul Orndorff into an Ultimate Warrior. So again, why do you need 2? So I went with Big Boss Man and Haku. And those were the only 2 black cards I owned as a kid. And they didn't disappoint. They're tremendous figures. And then after that, it was just, it was over. I didn't pursue the rest. And time passed, and the Hasbros came out, and so it was on to them. Yeah, and you know, I must have been playing for a while, because I remember having a lot of matches with Big Boss Man, a lot of matches with Haku, so I must have been playing with these figures pretty steadily until about 90. Well, I was trading back and forth with Hasbro, so I was playing with these figures well into 92. And that I'm about 14 at the time, so, you know, who cares, right? No, I'm 76, 86 is 10. Yeah, I'm 16 in 92. Playing with figures. But that's okay. So let's get into them. Let's get into the final LJN figures. And do I count the Young Bucks as an LJN figure? Hell to the no. It's going to be sad. The figure that I did own, the figure that I did have in childhood, and the figure that had an extremely busy role in my federation, is one of the best LJN figures ever made, the Big Boss Man. It is a hulking, dominating figure that looks perfect. It is a perfect Big Boss Man. It came with one of the better accessories of the time, the nightstick. You could really do some damage with that. And it really just captures the size of the Big Boss Man, and it's a great look. It's a great looking figure. Great looking figure and great looking character at the time. I really liked the Big Boss Man as a bad guy and as a good guy in the WWF. Very agile, very fun to watch, great matches. Loved the Big Boss Man. Got no problem with the Big Boss Man. One thing you'll notice on all of these figures, they are no longer stamped LJN. They are stamped Grand Toys. Okay, and I know that Grand Toys and LJN are closely related, but these figures are different. There's something different about them from the previous LJNs. They're a little harder. They just have a different feel to them. They're just different. Now, what I found to be interesting is the Blackstrap Andre, as he's lovingly known, has 1986 stamped on his butt and 1989 stamped on his heel. But this is the Andre, the third Andre the Giant, which is really just a repaint of the second Andre the Giant. Literally paint. This strap, the singlet here, is not molded on. It is just painted, which makes this figure extremely easy to customize and sell for $200. All you have to do is paint, have some good painting skills and a steady hand, and you can recreate this figure easily. Now, some people, the 1986, the second Andre, his teeth are colored in, I believe. I'll have to look. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I don't know, but maybe I think there's something that sets this figure apart that you could tell if it's been a custom. I think it's the teeth. I'll have to go back and look, but I think Andre number 2's teeth are colored in white, and Blackstrap Andre's are clear. I don't know, but never had him as a kid. Didn't need him as a kid. Had enough Andres. Wasn't using Andre in the Federation anyway. So why would I need this? So I bypassed him. But he's a fantastic figure. Naturally has to be one of my favorites because Andre number 2 is one of my favorites. And so this is just a repaint, so he's also one of my favorite figures. Great looking figure. And a really sad era for Andre because, this was the beginning of the end for him. The heel turn, or not the heel turn, the continued heel run. Tag team title run with Haku, and then a very brief, and if you blinked you miss it, face turn again in 90, 91, and he gets into like a little feud with Earthquake. Never wrestles again, but at one point he's the manager, or he accompanies the Bushwhackers to the ring. You know, again, if you blinked, you missed Andre's face turn, and then his death. And Andre's death was one of the first major wrestling deaths in my life. Yeah, I mean, maybe the first major wrestling death that really made me step back and go, wow, you know, this icon of childhood is dead. You know, the worst LJN figure ever made. A super waste, a ridiculous waste. Just there's so much wrong with it. The color, you know, the skin tone, the weird pink skin. Obviously, the horrible pose. And a figure that if he had a regular wrestling pose could have probably been, you know, played with a lot, because he was such a great character and was playing such a important role at the time. But Rick Rude, the ravishing Rick Rude figure, goes without saying is the worst. I'm gonna sneeze. Thank you. Thank you. The pose goes without saying as the worst pose. I don't know what... I assume that this is the gyrating hips pose. And I don't know. Is that what you do? But it's horrible. It's just so bad. And the tone, the skin tone, he's a weird pink, kind of, I don't know, kind of like a really high blood pressure pink. Just a bad figure. Just a really, really, really bad figure, and a great, great character. And I love Rick Rude. I just think he could have done so much more. I think Rick Rude I put up there with the Don Moroccos, you know, of the world that probably should have had more of an influence. Probably should have had more championships, but awesome wrestler, Rick Rude. Another death that was hard to swallow. The figure that I had as a kid, in the advertisement, he is completely different. He is advertised as King Haku in the advertisement. The actual figure is more of the Islander style Haku. In the ad, he comes with a crown. Then you get the figure in the mail, and there's no crown. There's no crown. But we do have Haku. And you'd say, well, how is he one of your favorites? How did you play with him? His hands are both up in the air. I don't know. I made it work. And Haku had a prominent role in my Federation. This is a great figure, and it really looks good. It looks like Haku. I've seen some people customize Jimmy Snuka into the Tonga Kid, or Fatu or Samu or whoever, and they recreate the Islanders. I don't like that. I'm not a custom fan. To me, it still looks like Jimmy Snuka with Islander trunks on. But Haku, the second of two black cards that I owned as a kid. And these are all, $150, $200 figures. And on card, they are all $500, $600, $700 figures. The great Haku. Perfect chop. The neck thrust. Haku. For a while, this figure was like the holy grail of black cards. He fetches $1,000 on card. Again, he's got this weird Rick Rude pink high blood pressure skin tone, and probably could have been a much, much, much better figure. The play pose is fantastic, but there's just something weird about it. And again, I think it's the color. It's just a strange figure. It's a great figure. It's a great playing figure. This is one of the LJN pose. If somebody put up on the channel the other day, what if the LJNs were just like 4 poses. They just picked 4 universal poses. Yeah, sure, I would have liked that as a kid. And this is one of the poses that I would have wanted. This is a great play pose. And, for a long, long time, this was a very sought-after figure. This was one of the grails. And now it's just now it's just a normal figure in the black card line. They all are the same. They all are valued at the same. But the Ultimate Warrior. Now, at the time, I didn't need one, like I said, because I had Paul Orndorff painted up very, very generically as the Ultimate Warrior. Best figure in the line, yeah. I it's close with the Big Boss Man, but this is the best figure in the black card line for me. This is one of my top 5 favorite LJN figures. Never had him as a kid. Always wanted him. Always regretted getting Haku and then wanting Warlord. And had I gotten Warlord, I would have regretted it and wanted Haku. But the Warlord LJN figure is incredible. And yes, there was supposed to be a Barbarian released with this lineup, Barbarian, Smash, and Bad News Brown, but never to be. Today, this is still one of my favorites. Like I said, I love this figure. It's a great looking figure. It is the Warlord. Just a tremendous figure. Maybe one of those poses, maybe one of those 4 poses that I would have chosen. I love this figure. Now, Hasbro comes out with this Sgt Slaughter figure in 1987. Sgt Slaughter is a full-on Joe at the time, a G.I. Joe, and Hasbro decides to capitalize on the LJN rage, and they develop and promote their own 8-inch LJN style Hasbro Sgt Slaughter. And after a little bit of research, I remember as a kid, I remember going to my childhood best friend's house. And he was a big G.I. Joe guy, and so he would get all the comics, and he would get all the... Well, he'd get all the comics. And so, initially, that's where I thought I saw the Sgt Slaughter ad. And they've got... And it's very bold of Hasbro, but they've got Sgt Slaughter climbing all over the LJNs. He's standing on Hulk Hogan. He's standing on Hillbilly Jim. He's standing on the Iron Sheik, if I remember. And it's basically Hasbro saying, our LJN style figure stands on all of the originals, stands above them, is better. Get ours. And so for the longest time, I was searching comic books. Where is that ad? Where is that ad? Where is that? And I have come to find out that it is not from the G.I. Joe comics. It is from a very, not rare, but very short-lived G.I. Joe magazine from 1987. And so I am on the hunt for that particular G.I. Joe magazine. Different than the G.I. Joe comic. G.I. Joe magazine was kind of like a Boy's Life magazine, that old Boy's Life, I don't know, some camping tips and some, like a mini G.I. Joe story or some survival tips, stuff like that. Like a Boy's Life, like I said. And in that magazine was the Sgt Slaughter Hasbro G.I. Joe ad. This is, a $500, $600 figure. And, there shouldn't be any debate. I mean, it is not an LJN figure. It had never touched an LJN factory. It is indeed a Hasbro figure. But to me, the LJN collection wouldn't be complete without him. And several years ago, I'm thinking probably about 18 years ago, I got this figure. And I got him for $175. The Hasbro LJN style Sgt Slaughter figure. Now there's not, the scale is fine. It's an 8-inch figure. Very hard, very hard rubber, extremely hard rubber, and very stiff, very bulky, and not really a figure that mixes in well with the LJN line. Just for some reason, its bulkiness just. Sgt Slaughter has never been this shredded in his life. They really made him into a superhero, and he just, even though he's the same size, he just kind of towers over. Even Andre the Giant, he looks like he could just destroy. So you don't mix him in. You don't play with the Sgt Slaughter Hasbro. You put him kindly on the shelf. You put him proudly on the shelf, and you love him, and that's my LJN Slaughter, my Hasbro LJN Slaughter. And then there were none. There were none left. Nothing. It's over. The LJN line comes to an end, and a major portion of childhood stops. Again, I didn't stop playing with them, but there weren't going to be any Mr. Perfect figures. There weren't going to be any Demolition figures. There weren't going to be any Earthquake figures. Dino Bravo. It was over. And then, I'm walking through a Kmart or a Walmart or maybe a Hills. I think it was Hills. I'm walking through a Hills in 1990, and there they are. Hasbro. Hasbro figures are on the shelf. And the next era begins. But we're not going to talk about Hasbros. Not for a while, if at all. I don't love them. But we're not done with the LJNs, ladies and gentlemen, because I will come back and we will go through the bendies. We will talk about the bendy ring and cage, which is one of my favorites. We will talk about the thumb wrestlers, which are actually growing on me a little bit. And we'll look at the stretch wrestlers, the worst of the worst. And then I think we'll dive into the Remcos again, and we'll go through the AWA stuff. Got plenty to show you. We're definitely going to talk about the Galoobs, the WCW Galoobs. And if you want, if there's demand, we'll talk about the Hasbros. And even the ECW San Francisco Toymaker line. There's the WCW San Francisco Toymaker line, LJN style. Right? For a while, they made these maybe about 7-inch hard rubber figures that were LJN-ish. And I loved them. And I love them now. So we'll do all that. We're gonna go through the whole revisited line. But before we do that, I want you to reminisce with me, and let's take a look at this little video package. Good night now.